Perfect. Sounds good. Well, just to introduce you, today we got Dr. Joel Kahn. He's an author and he's the founder of the Kahn Center of Cardiac Longevity. He's a summa cum laude graduate at the University of Michigan School of Medicine. He's a professor of medicine at Wayne State University of Medicine, and he's the owner of GreenSpace Cafe. I got all that right?
You nailed it. I can
Nailed it.
tell you were
Awesome.
born in Detroit. Look how smart you are.
Yes, sir. So it's a pleasure to speak to you today, Dr. Kahn. You've been good?
I'm having a great day. Just always hopping around, but talking to you and your audience is the moment that I've been waiting for all day.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, for those of us that don't know already, what's your general philosophy on nutrition for a fit, happy, healthy life?
Don't dig your own grave with your fork. That's my philosophy. Don't dig your grave with your fork. And that's to imply that the food we choose as early in life as possible, but today's a good day to slap you awake and say it matters. The food you eat is the single most important decision you can make for your health. Not the only decision. Don't smoke, get some fitness, get some sleep. Don't do crystal meth. Okay, that's a good lesson I won't do there. And manage stress and do a little yoga and ahimsa, love everybody. But if your fork is going into crap that's coming in a yellow bag out a drive-through window, odds are sometime in life it's going to catch up with you and you're going to be on 8 medications and be in the hospital and stop having erections if you're a guy and all kinds of consequences. And if early in life you learn to love salads and beans and have a garden and go to farmers markets and recognize you wouldn't put the crap that they make at fast food restaurants in your car, you shouldn't put them in your body. So I am plant-based. At age 18, which is 44 years ago, I stopped eating all animal foods, every dairy, every egg, every chicken, every turkey, every pork, every beef. And I'm not dead yet, pretty healthy, almost 62-year-old. And so I teach my patients, not just my experience, because that matters, but it's, just one experience, but really the science of how that can work for people. If they want to do it half-time, love you. 75%, love you more. 90%, you're really in a good place. And if you want to do it total plant-based, like many people can, you're getting, the best fuel for your body, but and just as long as you stay away from junk plant food. A fake grilled cheese sandwich is pretty equivalent to a grilled cheese sandwich. And if you want to enjoy that once in a while, that's fine, but, pretty rare event.
I really like that mentality because, sorry, first of all, before I say anything, 62 years old? That's very impressive. Yes.
I better pump that up a little bit. Yeah.
Conversation from one young man to another, right? For sure.
Yeah, you got it. Mentally 20.
Yes. Perfect.
Some would say maturity 13, but we can deal with that later. Makes life more fun.
Yeah. I mean, I really like that mentality, especially you say, even if you're 75% or 50%, it's good because you see people try to be very strict on their diet and then they just crash maybe 4 weeks in, right?
I'm pretty flexible and people criticize me. They criticized me today. There was an article, I read a lot of stuff early in the morning. There was an article about an egg substitute that I have no financial interest in. It's called Just Egg. Looks like you're buying maybe a container of mustard, but in a pan with vegetables and leafy greens and tomatoes. I mean, it makes an omelet. I think you wouldn't know that you weren't eating an egg omelet. It's chemical based. I mean, it's not the same as eating a tomato and a cucumber. So once a week, I make a Just Egg, completely plant strong omelet. I haven't done that, but I think the product's so tasty. I was getting beat up on Twitter today. Oh, I thought you're a whole food plant based. And they don't have that Twitter app where you can put up your middle finger and say, your own business. There's plenty of that goes on Twitter. It's a fun and ugly place. You better be ready for the fight. At any rate, I'm not judging you and I'm not judging my patients, but I'm going to remind them that, you really want to make, the cheats, if you want to call it that, infrequent, eat mainly whole foods, that are plants, eat things that are inexpensive, rice and beans and lentils and peas and fruits and vegetables, And you'll save spices, you'll save some money, drink a lot of fresh water, and you'll actually up your health a lot. Real colorful diet.
Yeah, you call your diet a plant-based whole food diet. That's what you refer to it as. Is there a difference between this and veganism?
Well, that's a great question. And so, just briefly, the word veganism was introduced in 1944 in England by a group called the British Vegan Society. They made the word up. They were a small group, I think, of men. I'm not sure that. Donald Watson is the name people know. And they were very committed to not using and abusing animals in their life, from clothing to food to any other way. And it was different than vegetarianism, which was popular in London because that still involved dairy and eggs. Maybe it didn't involve red meat. So they were looking for a word. There's a whole funny history of all the other words they were looking at, but they just took vegetarian and compacted down to vegan. So many people will say, you're not vegan if you wear leather shoes. You're not vegan if you drive a car with leather seats. The ethical imperative has to be that high. So Dr. Colin Campbell, PhD from Cornell, who wrote the famous book um, 15 years ago called The China Study, which everybody should read. The China Study. It's a big, thick book, but it's very readable. He introduced the term whole food, plant-based, as opposed, I said, eat a colorful diet. Skittles are colorful. Skittles aren't whole food, plant-based. So it pretty much captures it. And it can be 100% plants and it can be largely plants. I think there was a time Dr. Campbell would have a piece of fish in his diet. Well, he's 86, 87 years old. It's not for me to criticize him, but at any rate. So yeah, whole food, plant-based. If you want to have fun with people, you tell them I'm following the Withhabib diet. What's the Withhabib diet? Nobody's heard of that. The whole food, plant-based, if you say it quick.
Got it. Got it. Yeah, definitely. So with this whole food plant-based diet, does that mean that you can't have honey because it's like a technically an animal product? Because I think vegans can't have honey, right? Well, what's your thoughts on that?
I want you to say Withhabib for your audience.
Whiffabib. Whiffabib?
Good job. You nailed it. Say it.
All right, nice.
Um, honey is a very tiny but emotional issue because, and that was not intended, but it fits pretty well. It requires an animal, in this case, an insect called a bee, and the queen bee and all the followers to create honey. It turns out it's not the kindest experience, and they very often kill the queen bee at the end of the season, and um, they clip their wings so they don't fly away. They're to produce the mass amount of honey. Maybe there are ethical honey farmers that use practices in their backyard. I'm not speaking of those, but to produce all those bottles of honey you see at a grocery store, it's not as outrageously offensive as factory farming of cows and pigs and chickens and turkeys, where they just horribly abuse these animals for life. They never have a good day in their entire life, and they probably die young for sure. Bees, it doesn't strike you as much, but there are people, and I honor people that say, I don't eat honey for the ethical implications. There aren't really any health detriments to honey, so you can't really throw the medical issue at it. It's an entirely ethical issue. I happened to last weekend post something about honey and the ethics and all, and it was amazing the reaction, both sides. I eat it, I don't eat it. It's horrible to eat it. It's okay to eat it. So it is actually still a dividing line if you're into dividing with a bib eaters. I call it vegan, Beegan if you eat honey, and vegan if you don't. In my own family, we have a terrible split. My wife does not eat honey. I don't ever go for it, but if something had honey in it, I don't throw it out. I think that's worse. But we are all sensitive now how important bees are to fertilization and pollination of plants. And, the pesticides and other forces of maybe even EMF has reduced bee population. So we do want to keep an eye on healthy, large populations of bees to help us all out. The day we don't have flowers anymore is going to be a bad day for human health.
Yeah, I agree, definitely. So I would assume that your go-to sweetener is Like maple syrup, or is it just fruits?
Maple syrup. If I have a bowl of oatmeal, I might put a raisin or a date. Those are such natural sweeteners, fruit, berries. But if there's a reason, I know when my wife bakes, it might be maple syrup. There's, coconut sugar, date sugar. There were some honey substitutes on the market from Apple. I don't remember the trade name. I understand they're not available anymore. I'm sure there'll be something coming out.
Yeah, you mentioned dates. That's I don't know if that's my weakness, but I love dates.
I
That's
don't
the
think
end
you're
of
in
it
a
right there.
bad place. I mean, dates in the Mediterranean basin. You've been to Israel, or you've visited Lebanon, or other countries. Dates are the dessert. Maybe dates and a walnut. I mean, it's one of the great nutritional joys, and it's so sweet. Now you don't want to eat 10 dates. I have no idea exactly if that's 1,000 calories. Might be quite a bit more than 1,000. So if you're concerned with your weight, but if you're constipated, date it up. Prunes are enjoyable. They're actually
I don't know about
very
enjoyable,
good
but
natural approach to call them dried plums. All of a sudden they're PC. They're prune correct.
yeah, I have dates and walnuts. Actually, I used to have dates and walnuts and almonds, but walnuts just go so much better with them. And plus, it's like a little meal. Actually, it could get you pretty filled up
Yeah,
and
I
gives you
agree.
good energy too.
And it's right. It's like if you're riding bike, there's a lot of riders will put in their back those little pockets, dates and walnuts. You just stick the walnut in the date. You talk about pure energy boost, plus a lot of fiber, a lot of omega-3 fatty acids from walnuts. The best nut on the market are walnuts. They're good for you.
So walnuts, I'm guessing that chia seeds would also give you a great source of omega threes. Are those your go-to sources for omega threes?
Yeah, so just as an aside, I'm standing in my medical clinic in Detroit called the Kahn Center for Cardiac Longevity. We do reach out to patients all over the world, so if you're not in Detroit, don't fear. If you're looking to evaluate your heart health, upgrade your heart health, reverse your heart disease, that's what we do, really fun. You don't have to be 100% with a bib eater. You can be open-minded, just start eating salad and have an apple a day. But we do some real advanced blood tests, and you can measure a blood test for omega-3 levels in the blood. Why do we care? Of all the fats in the world, the only fats we need for human health are omega-3 fatty acids. We can't make them. If we could make them, it'd be no issue. We can make vitamin D from the sun. We can't make omega-3, the EPA, the DHA. And that means we have to eat them from food or take supplements. And the foods you said, so I measure a blood level. Whether my patients are meat eaters, plant eaters, 50% of my patients are severely deficient in omega-3 in the blood. Your brain needs omega-3. Your blood cholesterol and triglycerides need omega-3. All your cells need omega-3. You have to have it. So people are terribly deficient. And yes, then I go down my list. You need to start putting 2 tablespoons a day of ground flaxseed in your oatmeal, in your smoothie, in your salad, in your soup. Or learn to fall in love with chia seeds and learn to make chia pudding. Or some people just put chia in water and drink it down. Or fall in love, one of my favorites is hemp hearts. They're not hemp that creates THC or CBD, unfortunately. They're seeds at the bottom of the plant, but they're very rich in omega-3. They're very delicious if you have like toasted hemp hearts. Grocery stores have. Eat walnuts, leafy greens, spinach, kale, bok choy, arugula, very rich omega-3. And actually the surprising one, I actually always have in my office on the shelf to remind me, Chlorella and spirulina, which are algae that are made into tablets, or they can be a powder. You can get powder to put in your smoothie. They are unbelievably rich in plant sources of protein, omega-3, and about 40 other nutrients. So these are absolutely powerhouses of omega-3, and they lower cholesterol. A lot of people, a lot of athletes just feel better. So yeah, omega-3 is a big deal. I don't think we talk enough in both the plant-based medical community and just in general. Like there's t-shirts, where do you get your protein? I mean, it really should be, where do you get your omega-3? We all get more than enough protein unless you're eating bananas all day long. Which
Yeah,
people
yeah,
do. There are people that eat only bananas and they seem to survive, but not recommended here. I'd rather eat a banana than a donut any day.
yeah, definitely. I mean,
I'm going to take
that's
a
the issue.
chlorella break. I'm taking a chlorella break.
Chlorella back. Actually, I heard that it's super good, especially spirulina or whatever it's called. That it's super good for your immune system, right?
Yeah,
Like an
it's true.
immune system booster. Yeah.
It's true. There actually is omega-3, just before we leave that topic, is required for good immune function. You hear a lot about vitamin C, and that's true. And spirulina and chlorella have vitamin C. You hear maybe nowadays about vitamin D, zinc, sesame seeds, pumpkin seeds, really good in zinc. But you don't hear as much about omega-3 for the immune system, yet there is good science. So all these things we've just talked about, you don't have to eat salmon and sardine to get enough omega-3.
Yeah, and especially because of the mercury levels. Like I love fish, but it sucks knowing that it could
Bingo.
potentially be very dangerous. Yeah.
Bingo. I'll give you a bingo there because I do draw mercury levels on my patients. It's amazing how many of them are eating tuna or sushi tuna, and their mercury levels are insanely high. And these people are educated, often wealthy people, and they're walking around with toxins in their blood, like they're living in houses that have lead pipes. I mean, which many of us do. So lead is another one, but mercury is much more common.
Is there any way around that, like a place or a type of fish you could get that might not have that?
In general, big fish, more mercury. That's classic teaching. So people that eat shark, mackerel, tuna is a big fish. It may look small in a can or small in a tuna wrap, but it's from a big fish. They are more heavily mercury enriched. Salmon isn't supposed to be because it's a smaller fish, but I have people that eat salmon a lot and have high mercury levels. The world's a dirty place. Little tiny fish, sardine, herring, perch, supposed to be less. But we know you can get your omega-3 from plants. You just have to be intelligent about it. Every day I got all this stuff around me. I found these little packs, not my company. I don't even represent this company. These are 2 tablespoons of ground flaxseed organic. So I always have them around, throw them in the salad, throw them in soup, just a little more, targeted nutrition.
Yeah, that company actually has a few good things. They have this coconut spread.
Wow.
Really good, very good. I would definitely recommend that. And they should sponsor us because we're really giving them a real shout out right now. But I was also
You should
sorry, what
reach
were you
out
saying?
to them, get some big dollars for you.
Yeah, that's a good idea. I will definitely take you up on that. But I was thinking that in in the diet that seems almost perfect, or I guess perfect as you would say, and I also believe so too. Vitamin B12 and calcium seem like something that would be hard to get from there, at least from the initial thought when I first think about that diet. What do you have to say about that? Like, where do you think we could get those from?
Um, B12 is like omega-3. One, it's important. It's a vitamin. Humans can't make it and absorb it from our own body. It turns out we may actually make it in our lower intestine, but we can't absorb it. You actually absorb it from your small intestine and you make it in your lower intestine. Who came up with that plan? It's crazy. So we don't make usable B12. We need B12 for your nerve function. If you're really low in B12, you may get tingling and neuropathy. Need it to make red blood cells. You don't want to be anemic. It's important for the brain. There are conditions where even if you take B12, you can't absorb it well. That's called pernicious anemia. But really the focus is getting it. So there's a lot of foods that are supplemented with vitamin B12. That may give you enough. There are some foods that have B12 in it, nutritional yeast, that yellow cheesy-like yeast. A lot of people like to put on plant-based meals, like a marinara. The wrapping of sushi called nori can have some vitamin B12. But most people recommend if you're eating an all plant diet, you should probably take a little sublingual or oral capsule of B12 a few times a week. Just avoid it, or ask your doctor to draw a blood level. If you've been eating an all vegan diet for 2 years, have your doctor draw your vitamin B12 level. Now, going a bit beyond that, it's certainly B12 deficiency exists in people that are eating other foods too. It doesn't have to be vegans. In the factory farmed industry, the cows, the chicken, the turkeys, the pigs that are all locked up and having a bad life, they very often inject them with B12. The reason we believe meat has B12 in it is naturally cows are out there grazing in the grass, eating dirt. They're actually the bacteria in the dirt make B12, and therefore cows incorporate B12 in their meat, and a human eats cow meat and gets B12. Well, if you have a cow sitting in a warehouse with a steel floor, there's not going to be any dirt to graze upon. So I think the number is like 80% of all the B12 used in the United States is injected in factory farmed animals. So they're artificially boosting the levels so consumers will keep on eating meat. It's a nasty little thing.
Yeah. Would this also apply to eggs? Because I know they're rich in B vitamins too, right?
Not so rich, not so
Okay.
rich. I mean, there are eggs now that are enriched with omega-3 by feeding the chickens omega-3 enriched feed, and the omega-3 gets into their tissues. Um, but I don't think you'd look to eggs as a reliable source of vitamin B12. I apologize, I'm just texting a patient back, but I can keep on answering questions.
Yeah, all good, all good. So when it comes to calcium, so I don't personally drink milk just because I feel like I'm lactose intolerant, which I think most people are. But I used to drink almond milk, which was fortified with vitamin C. Oh, sorry, calcium.
Right.
Yeah, the thing is though that I've read a lot of bad stuff about supplemental calcium, that it could cause cancer and things like that. So where could we get our calcium from? And is that true that supplemental calcium is very dangerous?
Yeah. So overall, the data does not support the idea that people that eat all plants or largely plants have weaker bones, more bone fractures, osteoporosis. Particularly if you're eating an all plant diet and you give up dairy, there is some concern that dairy can be a source of calcium. But as an animal product, it can create a slight acidosis acid. And acid can chew up your bones to counterbalance it. And so you get the calcium, but you're using it in a product that's rather hard on your bones in the first place. Not a really smart plan. Um, you can get lots of calcium from plant-based foods. I think the winner of them all are things like Swiss chard and really dark leafy greens, turnip greens, mustard greens. Sometimes they have a little something called oxalates. So I eat all kinds of greens from spinach, kale, bok choy, dandelion greens, mustard green, turnip greens, uh, Swiss chard, but I don't need one all the time and rotate around. Get plenty of calcium. Like you said, many plant milks are fortified with calcium to give you just enough. That's a nice way. And there's so many great plant milks now. I've been drinking a lot of oat milk, oat coffee creamer, oat milk, yogurt, unsweetened, amazingly tasty product, like original Greek yogurt, but no dairy. There's no reason to take dairy. You're right. The kind of the consensus in 1 minute is supplementing. People take calcium, magnesium mixtures. Small amounts are fine, 500 milligrams, 600 milligrams. You just don't want to jack it up as high as we did maybe a decade ago.
Yeah, the one thing that I found while I was kind of discovering like the way I react to milk and things like that was that when I have kefir, I have no, congestion. I got no stomach issues at all. And would that classify as traditional dairy, or is that something that you would advise people to take?
Um, I like to be honest with the data. Um, for example, just 2 weeks ago, a pretty prominent research study that looked at a lot of other data concluded more dairy, more risk of prostate cancer in men. Certainly not the first time that's been shown, but it was a really good research group, very large study. That's not the perfect study. The perfect study, you 10,000 people drink milk, you 10,000 people drink something else, and in 20 years, we'll see you as prostate cancer. Nobody's going to do that study. So you got to use what you got. In the cardiac world, I can't tell people like Dr. Ornish, a doctor that 30, 40 years ago did some really pioneer research. He allowed his patients to have non-fat dairy yogurt, non-fat dairy yogurt, and he still showed that they got better heart disease outcomes, better reversing by the rest of their plant-based diet. There's other data that fermented dairy, not necessarily cheese, but particularly like you say, kefir, non-fat yogurts that are fermented, maybe a special class of dairy. And there are a lot of lactose intolerant people that do not feel good with any dairy, so don't do it. There's so many options. But I agree with you. There's a lot of Mediterranean basin diets. Labna, the non-fat dairy sour yogurt that you see in a lot of Middle Eastern foods, and kefir. I'm not sure where kefir naturally comes from. If that's the Indian tradition, I'm not sure about that. Lhasa maybe. But anyways, yeah, I don't do it. But if you said, I won't give up 100% of dairy, I think fermented dairy like kefir would be a good choice. A lot of these things have so much added sugar, they're basically ice cream. So you don't want to do that. No.
Yeah, when you look at the data, right? When you sit back and you analyze certain studies and everything, how can you pick between the authentic studies and the ones that are not? Because sometimes I think that, okay, they put these people on a, or like certain people on a vegan diet and other people were eating meat, but then I think to myself that there's so many variables where the people who were eating meat could have been eating like Popeyes. And then when they went on a vegan diet, they're like, oh, I feel so much great. I feel so much better just because they were incorporating plants into their diet. You
Right.
know, how do you distinguish between these?
Yeah, this is a hot button for me. I'll give you an example. How do you know that nutrition science is valid? Because particularly the media doesn't just take these headlines for political purposes. The media is got advertisers, and it's much more commonly meat, dairy, egg producers or restaurants, and it's going to be, you don't see too many plant-based lobbyists that are advertising in major journals. I mean, I'll give you an example. You're from Michigan. The Michigan Academy of Family Practice, doctors, family doctors, as a journal once a quarter, on the back page every time is a full page ad for meat. Why? Not because the science suggests it, because they pay big bucks for the, for the back page color ad. It's horrible. But those are the realities. And so you scratch your head and say, why the heck did that happen? I'll give you a quick example beyond that. About 8 weeks ago, there's a little debate, saturated fat, a kind of fat you find in butter, lard, chicken, turkey, fish, pork, cheese, saturated fat. Is it damaging and can increase your risk of having a heart attack, stroke, and other problems? This discussion and research has been raging on for 70 years. There's almost universal agreement amongst really advanced researchers. Lower the saturated fat in your diet, you lowered your risk of heart disease. So eat less butter, eat less lard, eat less animal products overall. The only plant product with a lot of saturated fat is coconut oil, which is why I'm concerned about that coconut product you just mentioned before. So read how much saturated fat is in it. So there was a research study 8 weeks ago that concluded, and this was generally considered the most prestigious, unbiased, scientifically grounded group in England. Lower your saturated fat, lower your risk of heart disease. Okay, I mean, how many media outlets picked it up and wrote headline stories about it? One, me. I wrote and wrote and wrote because I thought it was like a major breakthrough, although I was pretty confident. 2 weeks later, another study came out. It said exactly the opposite, published in a medical journal. Don't worry about saturated fat foods. Enjoy your meat and your cheese and your butter and your lard. 12 authors. You got to go to the very end of the journal article, which most people aren't going to do. And if you saw the headline in the newspaper, you can't do because it's just a summary. 9 of the 12 authors, scientists, get their funding from dairy, egg, meat, or all 3 of the above. 9 of the 12. You don't see that on USA Today, Newsweek, CNN, and all the other outlets. There was even another version of that article that came out, same thing. So it's tough. One way is to look, if you actually are really interested, to get the original paper, which isn't always easy. Where's the funding from? It isn't always crooked. There are actually studies on avocados funded by the Avocado Board that are probably authentic. And Almond Board does a lot of research. Walnut Board in California does research. If you threw out every study funded that had a conflict, you'd throw out a lot of science nutrition studies. So it takes a lot of money to do these studies. So really quickly, one of my heroes in the nutrition field, if we're focusing on nutrition, is a scientist in Los Angeles named Dr. Longo, L-O-N-G-O. He's generally considered probably the top scientist on nutrition, a good friend and somebody I read his work all the time. He says, one study doesn't change 70 years of science. So when you get a buddy, I get a trainer that says, You know, you're not eating enough meat. You need to add more red meat to build muscle. Dr. Longo says you look at 5 things. Number one, you look at the biochemistry. I mean, protein is protein. Protein are 20 amino acids. You can get them from plants like tofu. You can get them from, you know, turkey and beef. They got to be broken down by the body, absorbed, and then they build our tissues. The body doesn't care where you're getting your lysine or your methionine or you're getting your arginine and other amino acids. They're amino acids. So biochemistry says it doesn't matter. Then you get to something called epidemiology. I mean, are there studies that say animal protein is super good for you? Actually, most of it is the opposite. Most studies say animal protein is associated with more aging and more disease, like cancer, diabetes, heart disease. Then there's randomized studies, of which there's very few. There have been just 2 weeks ago, somebody did a study at Stanford, good study. Eat 2 beef burgers for 8 weeks every day, or eat 2 Beyond Meat plant burgers every day for 8 weeks. Healthy volunteers. The plant-based burgers won in terms of health measures. There you got a randomized study. Then you look at old people. Do you know any people that are 103, like live in Okinawa and other regions like that eat meat 3 times a day? There's always the 103-year-old lady who loved bacon and smoked cigarettes, but in general, you don't see it. And then finally, what does it do to the environment? What would an all-meat diet do to the environment in terms of water, air, forest, purity and all, and it's going to destroy it. So when you, that's how it's called the 5 pillars of nutrition science. And so when I see one new thing fly by, I look at the funding, I look at what's the other research in the field, but very honestly, it's very tough to do. You got to know statistics, you got to know the rest of the science in the field, and for the general public, that's just not possible. There's just a headline. Oh, bacon's good for you. So I love bacon. I don't care what my doctor says, I'll eat bacon. And it's a step backwards.
Yeah, it's so frustrating. It's very frustrating. It makes things so much more complicated and confusing. But
right.
I think when we look at studies on people that have actually, like Okinawa, right? That
Right.
kind of blows my mind. What are they eating? What are they doing? Because studies
Purple
on them are probably.
potatoes. Yeah. Yeah. There is a great book called The Okinawan Diet, but it was really featuring Okinawa, an island in the Japanese chain that got very famous in the 50s and 60s because people were living over 100 with way more, and a healthy over 100 with way more frequency than the United States. And people evaluated, and you know, they didn't smoke much and they're active and they get a lot of sunshine, but their diet was very unusual. It was very low in fat naturally. They didn't use lard, butter, oils, and they ate so many complex carbohydrates, of which purple potatoes, which may be very rich in antioxidants and polyphenols. So it's, you know, now there's unfortunately McDonald's and KFC in Okinawa. So many of these things get diluted by the diet we've exported to various parts of the world. We've got good diets, we've got bad diets. We've exported a lot of bad diets to the world. But anyways, Okinawa has been diluted a bit. But yeah, it's fascinating.
Were they doing any kind of fasting or time restricted eating? Because I know that is very good for longevity.
Yeah, you know, nobody ever called it that. Of course, these are just natural occurrences. Like they're the famous finding I'm aware of. There's an island in the Greek chain called Crete. Crete is another one that has really good health overall, very low heart disease rates. They actually don't follow a low-fat diet. Extra virgin olive oil from Greek olives are part of their diet. But it turns out there's about 180 days a year that there's some kind of fast in the Eastern Orthodox Church. I think that's the right church to give credit to. They aren't necessarily always 24-hour long fasts. Some of them are Lent for 40 days. But in one way or another, almost half of the days of the year are some restriction on diet if you're a religious follower and you're doing it. As an example, I can't tell you if Okinawa, they actually, just the nature of the Okinawan diet, and frankly, the nature of most whole food plant-based diets is lower calories per day than junk diets, of course. You can go to a Cheesecake Factory and get more calories in a meal than most people might have in 2 days. Very bad and dangerous habit. And a plant-based diet naturally lowers calories even compared to a Mediterranean diet. So that may be naturally built in some, it's called calorie restriction. I guarantee in Okinawa, they weren't looking at their watch. Okay, it's 14 hours without eating. Now it's time to go eat. I mean, that's a modern play and modern rules, a modern concept, a very good one, but not necessarily, one that I think they recognized. They didn't call it time restricted eating.
Yeah, is it just so when it comes to that, right? It seems from what you're saying that it's just a restriction in calories, which is the main important thing. But are there benefits of doing like a 1 day fast, like 24 hours for like growth, like hormone levels, everything like that?
Well, you're asking me on a good day. I'm in the second day of a 5-day program called the Fasting Mimicking Diet, made by a company that Dr. Longo founded. I mentioned his name already. The company, it doesn't show much. It's called Prolon, Prolon. The company's called L Nutra. The product, you maybe can see they're better, include Prolon. And it is the most scientifically backed program for a human to take 5 days on a low calorie diet. In fact, all the food comes in a box. This is day 2, but there's
Wow.
day 3, 4, and 5 coming up. And there's multiple scientifically proven benefits to doing this a couple times a year, once a quarter. If you've got a real weight issue, you might want to do it once a month. You only got to be really good 5 days in a row. Then you got 25 days to hopefully eat healthy, but the benefit persists. So that is the strongest data. Fasting for a day may help you lose weight. You may have some brain clearance and some spiritual enlightenment. And there are a lot of traditions, the Hindi tradition of, fasting a day. In the Mormon tradition, once a month on a Sunday, they fast. And there is some data that those people that actually do that have better heart health than those that don't honor the Mormon Sunday once a month fast. So there are little pockets like that. In my practice, I use this program because I've got incredible amounts of scientific publications by a guy that I consider the world's leading nutrition scientist. And it's plant-based, which is why it works out great for me. And soups and olives and nuts and little special drink here.
What's in that drink?
Water, a special liquid that comes with this that avoids your blood sugar dropping. I'm blanking for a minute on what's in it because when you're eating 700-800 calories a day, you might crash your sugar. I never happened to me, but it might. And they give you tea bags, so I put a hibiscus tea bag in here. Very, very rich, delicious antioxidant tea.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, when with blood sugar levels, I've heard you speak before about I don't know, I don't want to misquote you, of course, but were you saying kind of limit the berries that have a high glycemic index? Because I've heard it's not bad, and I've heard like you should stay away from them.
Well, berries are generally, I like to create bridges, not walls, between different nutrition camps. The paleo people love berries. Plant-based eaters love berries. Researchers on cardiac health love berries. Berry growers love berries. I was going to say the carnivore movement, the keto group, I don't think I mentioned. They love berries. We're talking blackberries, raspberries, blueberries, boysenberries, whatever you like. Because, the glycemic response, if you wear one of these continuous glucose monitors, which diabetics can get through their insurance, but crazy biohackers will wear one of these and their cell phone will tell them every 15 minutes what their blood sugar is. I've done that. Generally with berries, there's not much of a response. Grapes, for example, many people find healthy people that are wearing these continuous glucose monitors. They cost, hundreds of dollars if you don't get it by prescription. I will notice after grapes have very little fiber, whereas berries have lots of fiber. But I love grapes, so I eat grapes. I'm not worried about it. There's no real fruit. There's no fruit I wouldn't eat, even if you're pre-diabetic or diabetic. There's a group out there called masteringdiabetes.org, friends of mine, that take type 2 and type 1 diabetics, carefully counsel them to increase the plants in their diet, including lots of fruits, including mango, papaya, things you might say, oh my God, I can't eat those. And within a couple of weeks, they can eat those joyful, healthy foods without their sugar going crazy. But you're getting rid of meats and cheeses and lard and butter and most oils. Got to stop poisoning those cells with that high animal fat, little lipid droplets called lipotoxicity.
Definitely. I mean, that I hope that in the future, because I feel like there's a lot of funding, of course, behind meat, but when we look at basic health practices like fasting, like eating a plant-based diet, especially for fasting. There's no money, or it doesn't seem like there's a lot of money going in and out for that, or calorie restrictions. So I feel like it's
It
just not
isn't.
pushed.
It's a hot topic though, and there are a lot of studies. I have little Google alerts for health topics. I think there's more about intermittent fasting every day than almost any topic every day. Sleep health maybe is the other one. Sleep's a hot topic. So, the National Institutes of Health has funded Dr. Longo and researchers. They're very interested in it. Now, there's famous 25-year follow-up studies of using fasting diets in baboons and other apes that were funded by our government. So there is money in the field. There are companies, I just threw in my bag, a company that makes a little tool you blow in to find out if your fasting has created ketosis. So there's a business around fasting, powders and other things that I'm not saying I endorse them, but there is some money to get studies funded.
If fasting's been around for so long, why I feel like just now recently it's been a hot topic, like,
Yeah, because we're getting fatter and fatter and fatter and fatter and fatter, and we're looking for solutions. And it's a brilliant solution if you're getting fatter and fatter. And I mean no disrespect to anybody. Stop eating or eat less or take a break from eating. Then there's actually the science that when we reduce our calories or take a break from eating, we have internally mechanisms that, again, Dr. Longo, to mention his name again, has been the pioneer in much of this, not all of it, much of it. When we either naturally, we can't find an animal to kill in the wild, so we're hungry, there's systems that turn on that protect our body from damage and even repair damage in our body. That's the concept called autophagy. Now we're using that purposely. Okay, I'm at optimal weight, I feel great, but I'd like to do something that might impact repairing and rejuvenating my body. Fasting happens to have a lot of science, and it's universal. You can study yeast, earthworms, mice, humans. The pathways have been retained. So now that we understand why, fasting is a way to lower your IGF-1. Fasting is a way to inhibit your mTOR pathway for a few days. These are the hot kind of pathways of anti-aging, and you can use food. You don't have to necessarily buy a $200 a month supplement.
Yeah, definitely. There are a lot of I didn't know about that, like blowing into something to find out if you have ketosis. People are very creative, right? I mean,
Because there's acetone in your breath, which is one of the ketone bodies. And then you can dip your urine in a dipstick, see if you've got ketone bodies. If you're seriously fasting, they will show up. But type 1 diabetics, brittle diabetics, frail people, elderly, nobody should be playing with that stuff without careful medical supervision.
interesting. Very interesting. Well, I know we're short on time. I just wanted to end up with one question. What is your day looking like? What's a day in the life of Dr. Joel Kahn? Eating wise,
That's
living
good.
wise, everything.
I'm big on sleep. Doesn't mean I get it perfectly every night. I wear a ring called an Oura ring. I don't own the company, Oura. So I get a little report. It seems silly, but how many hours, deep sleep, latent sleep, restlessness, restfulness. So before I do anything, I have a couple minutes of gratitude that I woke up, that I'm healthy, I got a family, I got 2 dogs on my bed, and got a busy day ahead. I work out every day, might be 20 minutes, might be 30 minutes, might be some stretching, yoga, elliptical. I can't do the same thing every day. I might box one day. I mean, I got some stuff at home. When it's nice out, I'm outdoors. I actually live on a little hill. So I'm like a maniac. I'm running up and down in the grass barefoot with a weighted vest on, listening to podcasts. 4 or 5 days a week, I'm coming to the office by 8 a.m. Usually breakfast, I'd say 50-50. I'll take a black coffee and run. I'll sit down and have a bowl of oat bran, flax, cinnamon, raisins. I might make a smoothie now and then. This week it's Prolon, a little nut bar. And that famous just egg omelet I got beat up about, on Sundays. Not this Sunday because they'll still be on Prolon. I see patients all day long in a specialty heart clinic, Kahn Center.com. And then about 5 o'clock, I wrap it up, go home, hang out with the wife, the dogs, play around a little bit. And then there's other work to do. I write articles, I make YouTubes. I did an hour-long interview today with a news outlet. I do some national TV. I've got to record something Monday with the doctor's show and national TV show.
Nice.
Fun stuff.
Well, there it is. You guys just heard it. I appreciate you taking the time to talk to me, and it was
Did
a
it.
pleasure. I learned a lot. Thank you very
Did it.
much.
Thank you for accommodating my schedule and doing it this time. You have a great day. Send me it so I can share with all my people too. Yes,
For
great
sure,
questions.
definitely.
Great
Thank
questions.
you. Thank you very much. All right, have a good day, doctor.
Go blue.
Yes, sir.